In round 6 of the Qatar Masters Open, most of the top games were drawn, so the standings at the top didn't change. So I'm going to look at a game further down the tournament, and it's the game between Wei Yi, 16-year-old Chinese player who's touted as a potential challenger to Carlsen in years to come, and he's playing against a German grandmaster, 23-year-old Stefan Bromberger. So Wei Yi has the white pieces. Now, he hasn't been playing a good tournament so far. He's on 2.5 out of 5. A bit of a disappointment for his fans, but let's see how it gets on in this game. Now, it's a Petrov, and Wei Yi has selected this quite trendy variation against the Petrov, playing knight c3. Now, the position, as far as the pawn structure goes, looks almost symmetrical, but having the pawn on c3 rather than, well, let's say, d3 actually changes the position a great deal. It means that white has potential pressure on the semi-open d file, but also it means that his bishops have far greater freedom than, whoops, I misfired, than black's do. This one's slightly impeded. So that little difference in the structure just gives white a bit of initiative because he has greater piece activity. And more than that, white is able to castle queenside very quickly. So we have a double-edged position already. Now, this is a pretty standard position, and h4 is a normal move. For example, Carlsen played this against Ivanchuk in the recent Berlin Rapid World Championships. But Wei Yi selected c4 here, which to my eyes looks like a very reasonable idea to prevent black playing d5. So that means this is perhaps slightly weakened. And the queen also controls the a5 square. Knight c5 by black. Well, it looks reasonable to activate the knight in this way. And then the only thing is that Wei Yi was able to exchange this off straight away and activate his queen. And I think we can see the clear difference between the two sides, that white has these open lines for his pieces. Black's queen came out to a5, which kind of looks okay, but actually it's not doing too much on the queen side. Where you played bishop d3 looking at the h7 pawn, so there's a simple tactic. If queen takes a2, you can play queen e4, hitting h7 and e7. Therefore, bishop f6 was played, looks very logical, and now a3. So you can see that actually the queen isn't really doing too much on a5, and white's queen is far better placed. Having said all that, you can see that black has been able to develop his pieces actually without too much difficulty, and here he's very close to equality. White is slightly more active, but black is doing absolutely fine. So Wei Yi doing his best to stir things up with f4. But in this position, I think black is really very close to equality. I mean, there's a vague threat of perhaps pushing this pawn all the way through to f6, but I think if black withdraws the bishop, I don't think he has too many difficulties here. Should be absolutely fine for black. But after quite a long think, Bromberger played f6, and that, I think, is a really dubious move. I mean, it just weakens all the squares around the king, and in particular the g6 square. And I think there's more than one way for white to play this position. But anyway, Wei Yi selected bishop g6, good move, hitting the rook on e8, now after the exchange of rooks on d1. So that rook, well, it's in a bit of trouble. If rook e7, then you can see f5 wins because of the pin. So the rook comes to d8, hitting the queen, and then he'll be able to move the bishop. Now, I think white has two very attractive continuations here. The game continuation, but also simply queen e2 is very powerful, hitting that bishop. And now, for example, bishop f7, you can exchange. The queen comes into e7. Now we need to just stop any nonsense on the back rank. So rook e2 just keeps everything protected. And with white dominating heavy pieces, he just needs to improve the position of his king a little bit, and then this, I think, is close to a technical win, actually. But Wei Yi selected a more dramatic continuation. He took the bishop and sacked his queen. Now, he doesn't risk a great deal here, and the point is this, that he's threatening a checkmate on e8. I mean, this is such an inviting continuation. It would be very hard to pass up this chance. Now, black has only one way to prevent this mate, and that's to give a check and play king f8 so that he's covering the e8 square with his king and queen. But you can see that black is completely tied up here. The king and queen really can't come into the game. And white does not need to recapture the queen straight away. That would, I mean, even here white would have winning chances actually, but basically white's strategy in this position is to improve the position of his king and only then enter into a king and pawn endgame. Now, objectively, I suspect this is actually winning for white, even if black defends perfectly. But in practice, I would say it's completely winning. It is so difficult for black to defend because on every turn you have to calculate as black whether the king and pawn ending is still drawn. So white can make improvements in his position, whether it's with pawn moves or, well, king move, of course. I mean, there's a very simple plan here which Wei Yi carries out, and that is to bring the king up to, well, first h5, and after the trade on e8, then you put the king on g6, and this is inevitably going to be a winning king and pawn endgame. But there are a few technical difficulties. You have to watch out for checks from the queen. Well, at the moment, a queen d1 check leads nowhere, and the queen simply has to go back to defend against e8, and black has achieved nothing. So let's just go back. In the game, Bromberger doesn't actually cut across white's plan of king h5 in any way. I think it would it would give white far more technical difficulties if he played f5 in this position. And now you can see, well, just with that queen covering h4, it's not so easy to get the king across up to h5. And if this is taken, then the king can bounce out. Now, I think there are a couple of ways that white can play to win this position. One is simply to advance the king side pawn to h5 and perhaps collect this and then use the rook to collect another pawn on the queen side. That's possible. But actually, I think it's quite interesting for white to again play for a king and pawn endgame. And let me just sort of sketch out a possible way that white could play this. So a4 is a useful move to cut down on tempi moves by black. Now, these checks don't get very far, so the queen comes back, okay, the rook comes back. And now we advance the h-pawn. This is going to be useful later on. I'm not saying black is defending perfectly, I'm just giving you a possible way that white could play this. And we exchange. And now we're ready to enter into the king and pawn endgame, because this one is going to be winning because, well, basically we can force the black king back. That pawn move a4 is very useful because it cuts out tempi moves. So in this position, after the trade, it's very important that pawn's still on c2, so you play c3, and now the king is forced back and you play f6. And here, well, you can win by collecting that pawn, or you can collect these, and that's going to be a win as well. Probably collecting the h-pawn is the simplest. But, okay, I think f5 would be a trickier move than Bromberger played in the game, because here I think life was somehow very, very simple. Once the king comes to h5, I think you know, in practice, this, well, I think objectively, this is completely lost. A4, very good move. So this takes away the black tempi moves. So black is going to run out of moves on the queen side. I mean, you know, you could fiddle around with b6 and stuff. I don't think it changes anything, actually. And here it's pretty simple. And only now, having got the king to the best position and advanced the kingside pawns, now is the right moment to enter into the king and pawn endgame. So let's just see how the game finished. And g5 was the final move of the game. I mean, it's not too difficult to work out. Let's just see a couple of variations. So what if black plays like this? What if you exchange? And now let's go back, and now g6. And very soon black runs out and moves on the other side of the board, for example, and white wins the pawn here. Or if f5, let's give a check. And now we just need to shake black away from the g7 pawn. Let's do it this way. And b3, and black runs out of moves, and that is that. So, well, a very smooth victory, at least on the surface. I think black could have defended a little bit better, but I'm sure this was a winning endgame. And, well, just such a nice position to end up in. I mean, it's beautiful when you've got black in the box in this way. So, after 6 rounds, oh, well, I should say that brings Wei Yi up to 3.5 out of 6. So he's fighting back, but not a great tournament for him. But after 6 rounds, we still have Carlsen out in the lead on his own with 5 points. And then there's a stack of players on 4.5, including, well, Giri, Yu Yang, Kramnik, etc. So the pairings in round 7, the big pairings, Carlsen plays Giri. Carlsen has the white pieces. And Yu Yang plays Kramnik. Now, 2 fascinating games there. Remember, in the last round of Qatar last year, Yu Yang defeated Kramnik to win the tournament. And, of course, well, we all want to see Carlsen Giri. So look out for my report after round 7.